Hello, Teacher Preston here with another video. So let's get into it. So let me just put my share screen. So today, before I do that, today we're going to go over the first page of the first chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. So very, very good book, very pertinent book. I guess you could say it's one of the great American novels. So let's get into it. Okay, let me do my sharing. Okay, let me just get my volume up a bit here. So part one. When I was nearly 13, my brother Jim got his arm badly broken at the elbow. Let me not forget my sip of espresso, sorry. Early in the morning. So broken at the elbow. When it healed, Jim, or let me get my pointer here just to make it clear. When it healed, Jim's fears of never being able to play football were assuaged. He was seldom self-conscious about his injury. His left arm was somewhat shorter than his right. When he stood or walked, the back of his hand was at right angles to his body. His thumb parallel to his thigh. He couldn't have cared less so long as he could pass and punt. When enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discussed the events leading to his accident. I maintained that Ewell started it all, but Jim, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. He said it began the summer Dole came to us. When Dole first gave us the idea of making Brew Radley come out, I said if he wanted to take a broad view of the thing, he really began with it really began with Andrew Jackson. If General Jackson hadn't run the creeks up the creek, French would never have paddled up the Alabama, and where would we be if he hadn't? We are far too old or settled an argument. We were far too old to settle an argument with a fist fight, so we consulted Atticus. Our father said we were both right. Being Southerners, it was a source of shame to some members of the family that we had recorded ancestors on either side of the sorry you just hang on you just on this page shame to some members of the family that we had no recorded ancestors on either side of the Battle of Hastings. All we had was Simon Fitch, a fur-trapping apothecary from Cornwall, whose piety was exceeded only by his stinginess. Okay, let's get into it. So, when we were nearly 13, it's a good way of opening the story. A good way of saying, when we automatically refers to the past, so something that happened in the past. My brother Jim, so Jim usually is short for Germany, but it depends. Got his arm badly broken at the elbow, so his arm was broken. When it healed, and Jim's fears of never being able to play football were assuaged, So a sword's also older word, um, meaning were sort of dismissed, were forgotten, were put out of one's mind. And by football, we mean American football, not soccer, uh not English football. Because why? Because this is in Alabama. He was seldom self-conscious about his injury, so he never thought about his injury. He wasn't conscious of it. His left arm was somewhat shorter than his right. When he stood or walked, the back of his hand was at right angles to his body. So the back of his hand was like that to his body. So it's describing that his whole arm was twisted. His thumb parallel to his thigh. So his thumb um, was like that. So like that, but upside down. Um, he couldn't have cared less so long as he could pass and punt. So he couldn't care less. He couldn't care as long as he could pass. So pass and punt, I guess, would be dodge the ball. Uh-huh. When enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discussed the events leading to the accident. So they're talking about um, that when years had gone by, they um, enough years had gone by. So enough means a sort of longer time period. They had a sort of better view of the accident, and they talked about it. It maintained that I maintained that E. Wells started it all. So E. Wells is obviously a name of a person, but Jim, who was 4 years my senior, so but Jim, who was 4 years my senior, senior means old, older, junior means younger, said it started long before that. So they're busy debating how it started. He said it began the summer Dill came to us when Dill gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. So he's saying that it started when Dill, don't know who Dill is, but a friend of theirs or family member um, came to them and gave them idea of making Boo Radley come out. So Boo Radley, you can automatically, the name sort of indicates the South. I said if he wanted to take a broad view of things, it really began with Andrew Jackson. So he's saying broad, so broad as in wide. So if you want to take or open view of things, it really began with Andrew Jackson. If General Jackson hadn't run the creek, Simon Finch would have never paddled up the Alabama, and we would where would we be if he hadn't? So he's talking. General Jackson is a famous figure from the American Civil War. So if he hadn't run the creeks, so I guess Union forces, or could be another name for Cree Indians up the creek. So up the creek, up the river, so a smaller river. Simon Finch would have never paddled up the Alabama. So you will see this name again. So also like Abraham Lincoln did, tell them what you told them and then tell them again. So he's setting the scene here. Would have never paddled up the Alabama. So Alabama obviously is river. It's also stayed in the southern United States. And where would we be if he hadn't? And where would we be if he hadn't come here, if he hadn't settled here? They're saying they wouldn't exist. Where would we be? I mean, with a question mark, if he hadn't, meaning most probably that they wouldn't be there, or they would have been somewhere else. We were far too old to settle an argument with a fist fight. So they were saying they were too old to settle argument with a fist fight. So they talked to, so we consulted Atticus, our father. Atticus, our father said we were both right. So Atticus is a way of introducing him. Atticus, or name at the end, and then our father. So end the sentence with his name, and then our father lets us know the relation to him. Being Southerners, it was a source of shame to some members of our family that we had no recorded ancestors on either side of the Battle of Hastings. So because they were from the South of America, it was shame that they didn't have any English blood. So Battle of Hastings was a battle in that it fought at the Battle of Hastings. So they didn't have anybody that fought there on either side. So on the mother side or the father side. All we had was Simon Finch. So we saw it before here. Where is it? Simon Finch. So he's introduced, and then they mentioning him again. So this is a technique that writers use to, one, introduce a character, and two, to sort of reiterate their importance. All we had was Simon Finch, a fur trapping apothecary from Cornwall. So fur trapping. So in the early days in America, a lot of people came to trap fur because fur was very valuable. And in a lot of other countries like Russia, today it's still valuable. So you can sell it for a lot of money. And at one time it was worth more than sort of gold as a commodity. And apothecary, so apothecary is an older word for like chemist or pharmacist from Cornwall. So Cornwall is a place in the south of England whose piety was exceeded only by stinginess. So his piety is like godliness, holiness is only exceeded, was only exceeded. So only a stinginess. So stinginess meaning that he was a spendthrift was more than his piety. So from this we can sort of surmise that he wasn't most probably necessarily the nicest character, because he was very tight with money, didn't want to spend money, and it sort of people who are sort of pious tend to sort of judge people a lot, not always, but I don't know, the sort of feel of the writing, with the sort of feeling I'm getting from the writing doesn't describe him in the best sort of light. Okay, so let's just stop the share here. Thank you for joining me for today's lesson, and see you in my next video. Bye bye.